Welcome to Horsefly Chronicles Radio with Julia and Philip Siracusa. Sponsored by Carnation. Airing live on United Public Radio Network on 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. This show's opening has been produced, edited, narrated by Gwen Luckett at gluckett.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monday night segment of Horsefly Chronicles Radio with myself, Julia Siracusa, and Phil Siracusa. We're broadcasting live from the United Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 FM and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We're also live on Roku, so you can watch us live from your TV. We're fully sponsored by Carnation, so we want to thank them for their sponsorship. We love them. You'll have to do a few things in order to participate in chat. Go to the YouTube UFO Paranormal Radio Network. You can go to all of the Facebook stations, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, UFO Undercover with Joe Montaldo, News on the Flip Side, Twitch, SoundCloud, and Podbeam, and of course our group, Horsefly Chronicles Radio. And if you have any questions for our guest, please ask. So tonight, guys, we have another amazing guest. So please welcome to the show, James Szubski. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Margie's Outdoor Store located deep within the Columbia River Gorge in Washington State. In 2022, his store initiated a paranormal reporting program, which has now received well over 100 reports of strong activity in the Gorge area. James is a former volunteer search and rescue EMT, a wildland firefighter, a mountain guide, and a highly decorated U.S. Army veteran. He currently volunteers his time as the leader of the Klickitat Ape Cat Research Team. I hope I said that right. So please let's welcome him to the show.
Welcome.
I threw a whole bunch of weird pronunciations at you, didn't I? Thank you very much for having me on.
That's what I do, always, every show.
Yeah, it's a Klickitat Ape Cat, and it's named after Klickitat County, where the store is located. And
nice.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
So take us to the beginning of your story. How did your store become this hot spot for the paranormal? Let's start with that.
Well, if you had asked me 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, are you a paranormal researcher? I would have said no. I would have been completely out of any league of what I would have imagined. But a few years ago, my mother-in-law passed away, and my wife and I inherited some of the businesses she had here in the Gorge, a little town called Bingen, Washington. It's got about 800 people living here. And but we're right across the Columbia River from Hood River, Oregon, which is a much bigger town. And so we really kind of look at the Gorge as a single community. And so she left us a couple of stores. One of them wasn't doing very well. So with all of my outdoor experience, we converted it to an outdoor store. And right away, like day 3, people started coming in and telling us about some really incredible experiences they're having in the wilderness areas. These were mostly Sasquatch and UFO stories. And, in my military experience, I've had, let's just say, good reason to believe that when people report unusual experiences, some of the times they're telling the truth. Like sometimes they really have encountered something significant. Obviously, soldiers BS each other all the time. And sometimes that's not the case. But I knew enough to know that there's a chance that some of these stories are real. And I was fascinated by it. So we put up a big sign in the window that said, "File paranormal reports here." And, oh, Lord,
Wow.
It worked. And so there's an update to the intro. We've been doing this for a little over a year and a half, and we now have over 220 paranormal reports in the gorge. And so those are people coming into the store. We have a form that you can fill out. A lot of people prefer just to give an oral report. We also recently have put it up on the website, the ability to file reports. And so that's margiesoutdoorstore.com. And there's a paranormal tab. You can get into the paranormal reporting. A lot of folks will ping me on Facebook when I put up an interesting picture or something like that. And so we'll get a lot of stories that way. And then I've become pretty well known in the gorge. And so people will stop me at the post office or in the grocery store and tell me what they've experienced. And so we were living in Seattle, my wife and I, and we decided to move down here to take on the family businesses. And so just to give your listeners a sense of where the gorge is, the Columbia River is the largest river in North and South America that empties into the Pacific Ocean. It forms the border between Washington State and Oregon State in the Pacific Northwest. Our closest city would be Portland, Oregon. It's about 60 minutes to the west of us. So the gorge, back in the 80s, was designated as a national scenic area because it is so jaw-droppingly beautiful here. Basically, what a national scenic area is, it's sort of like a combination of a national park, but people are allowed to live and work here and run businesses here. So it's sort of a hybrid of the national park system. The gorge itself is 80 miles long, and it is the only sea level passage through the Cascade Mountains.
Oh, wow.
And so the Cascade Mountains include many peaks over 10,000 feet. Some of the more famous ones would be Mount Hood, Mount Shasta, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, and of course Mount St. Helens, which erupted in 1980. So the Cascade Mountains themselves form a rain shadow. So everything to the west is basically Pacific Northwest rainforest, sees over 100 inches of rain a year. And everything to the east is High Plains desert, and it sees only 10 inches of rain a year. And so, I live in the town of Stevenson, I drive to the town of Bingen, and I start in the rainforest, and I get to work at the edge of the desert. And so because of the river that's here and the mountains, you can go in a half a mile from sea level to 4,000 feet. And it's got these incredible columnar basalt cliff walls that form most of the gorge. It's got the highest concentration of waterfalls anywhere in the United States. On the Oregon side alone, there are 90 waterfalls. Some of them are 600 feet tall. The place is filled with caves and glacier-clad mountains. And it is really, for an adventure guy like myself, sort of like landing in heaven. Like I couldn't imagine a better place to live. And then we started getting all these paranormal reports, and it's kind of like a Scooby-Doo mystery walking in our door a couple times a week. And it just really became this amazing experience. And it's been I have to say, overall, an extremely joyful experience, getting to know folks, hearing their stories, tracking down these mysteries, and living in a place that's really just kind of a wonderland.
Wow.
It's pretty awesome.
Wow. Have you ever had a paranormal experience as a child?
The short answer is yes. And I've had a number of unusual experiences. I think the ones that are most dramatic and interesting, I was studying Aikido, martial arts, and practicing Zazen, sitting meditation. And I began to see auras. So was able to see light around folks, and when I was in the wilderness, able to see it over certain terrain features and things of that nature. And I've had some precognitive dreams and things like that. And I think, one of the things that I'm learning since we moved to the gorge is so many people jump to normalizing a strange experience. So they've had some kind of unusual encounter, and they immediately try to fill it with something that they know. And so when someone's telling you a paranormal story, you're automatically in the back of your mind going through a whole list of, it's a lens flare, it's this, it's that, it's not what you think you saw. And people do that to themselves, where they have an extraordinary experience and then they talk themselves out of it. And what I'm kind of learning is that if you can relax and allow that strange information to sort of sit, some really wondrous things start to emerge. And if you can just reserve judgment and reserve the need to fill it in with something that is normal, I guess I would say. And I think when we started this project, had some very clear instructions to our employees. I said, first of all, you're going to treat everyone who walks in the store with respect and dignity. No matter how outlandish their story seems, we're going to take in the data. We're going to ask intelligent follow-up questions. We're not going to tell them they're crazy, and we're not going to fill in what we think they saw. We're going to let their report be what it is, and we're going to believe the witness. And for sure, we recognized that there would be some people coming in telling tall tales. And I thought to myself, there's no harm in that. They can come in and tell the tale. If it doesn't fit into a larger pattern or they don't seem credible, there's, no big deal. They're just having fun. But it turns out that very, very few people who come in and file a report are, attention seekers or looking for, they seem to all have had very genuine experiences. And that's been really, really phenomenal. And, just to give your viewers a little preview, we've had many Sasquatch reports, many UFO reports, including glowing orbs, traditional UFO craft, tic-tac shape, triangular shape, and then, of course, advanced military aircraft. We've had reports of ghosts and apparitions. We've had reports of portals and loss of time. And most interestingly, the thing that really has caught my attention is we've had close to 70 reports of an enormous Black Panther creature that we call the Klickitat ape cat. And so there's this wide range of phenomena that's happening here. And it's a really interesting question about why is that happening here in this to such a high degree.
Yeah. So what do you think the cat is, and have you seen it before? Have you seen it?
So let me start at the beginning. The first report that I ever got. So I was at the store late at night. It was just before closing. And a gentleman came in who was a friend of the family. He knew my mother-in-law, Margie. And she had helped his family out with some medical issues. And it took him about 45 minutes to get up the courage to tell me what he had experienced. But he was orienteering, so he had map and compass, probably about 4 miles west of the store, at an area called Buck Creek. And he said his compass started acting strange. Now, that in and of itself is not a big deal, because when you look at the navigation maps published by the government, there's bright pink letters on all the maps of the gorge that say, warning, magnetic compass readings will be off in this area. We have a lot of reasons for that geologically. So he said his compass started going strange, and he started getting a strange feeling. And he looked across the creek, and he saw this enormous, large black cat. And he said that the creature had long fur. It was 4 to 5 inches long. It stood straight out from its body. It was powerfully, muscularly built, and it stood 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. Now, as you mentioned in the intro, I'm a pretty experienced outdoorsman, as a search and rescue EMT and a soldier and, mountain guide, wildland forest firefighter. I've seen a lot of creatures, and I know, what they look like and how they behave. And there are some things that were flags for me. First of all, we have cougars here, but cougars never turn black, and science doesn't recognize black cougars at all. When they express their melanin, they go from tan to reddish color. They never go black. The only large black cat in North America is the black jaguar, but its range is 1,000 miles south of here in New Mexico and Arizona, that area. So the fact that there's a black cat is a point of interest to me. And the size. So cougars typically are no more than 24 inches tall at the shoulder, 2 feet. This thing is 4 to 5 feet tall. That's bigger than a tiger. And that is absolutely, at this point, we're talking about a creature that's impossible. There's nothing in the scientific record that indicates there's a living cat that's 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. There is one cat in the fossil record that's big, and it actually lived in Washington State during the Ice Age. It's the American lion, also known as the Panthera atrox, and there's great fossil evidence of it. And it was basically a giant cat, biggest cat that ever lived. And it's estimated to have weighed over 1,000 pounds, and it would have stood 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. Interestingly, it had the largest brain capacity of any cat that has ever been found. But it went extinct 10,000 years ago, so that's not likely what it is. So he went on to describe it, and then he kind of paused for a second, and he said, and the strangest thing is that it had a face that looked like a monkey. And, I asked him to describe it in detail, and I always hold back some of the details of that original story so that I can confirm other people's reports. But he said it had intelligent ape-like eyes and other primate features. Most notably, its snout was shortened, and so it had more of a flatter face. But he was really clear on this one point. And so, I took down the information, and I was just fascinated by it. I couldn't imagine, there's nothing in my personal experience that would equal that. So the next day I was talking to my employees about it. And one of my employees named Missy, she's a very honest young lady. She's the kind of person that feels guilty about playing practical jokes because that's kind of like lying. And so she would never do something like that. She said that one morning she was driving down Klickitat Canyon, which is one of the major canyons that empties into the Columbia River. It actually comes off the glaciers of Mount Adams. She lives up Klickitat Canyon. She was driving at dawn, and she saw this, it was probably 3-4 years ago, this enormous black cat prowling around sort of near the side of the road. And she was just mesmerized by it. She stopped her car, and she was certain that it was a cat because it had a long black cat-like tail, and it was moving like a cat. And she watched it walk into a small patch of tall grass, and then she never saw it again. She actually got out of her car and was looking around, and the creature was nowhere to be found. Mm-hmm. She wondered if she should warn some of the local homesteads, but figured they would just think she was crazy. Mm-hmm. And in fact, she stopped telling people this story because when she told her family about it, they said, well, you probably saw a cow. Now, mm-hmm. This is one of the reasons why we really make big efforts to believe the witness. I mean, if you're a grown woman, you know the difference between a cat and a cow. Like if you saw a Ferrari driving down the road and you told your friends about it, said, well, Ferraris are pretty rare. What you probably saw was a minivan. Like, that's just insulting. Like, the difference, right? Exactly. And the thing that was interesting was her emotional response. When I told her that there was this report, and the person to me seemed credible, friend of the family, and, the other things ways that we evaluate the truthfulness of people's reports. And she for a long time had felt very alone. She had this really extraordinary experience, and no one believed her. And that there was someone believing her and corroborating her experience was very cathartic. And what I have found time and time again, as we talk to different folks and they tell us these incredible experiences that they've had, the overwhelming response is, thank you for believing me. No one else has. And I think that that's a really important component for those of us who are involved in paranormal research, is understanding, believing the witness and giving them the respect that is due any adult. So here are two people that I considered highly credible. I had Missy, an employee who had, never fabricated any report about anything before. And this other guy who was a friend of the family and was very earnest about his story. And I thought, wow, I want to know more about this. So the store has a radio advertising budget, and I put out radio ads. Has anyone else in the gorge seen this creature? And then I tacked up signs at the trailheads, and reports started flooding in. And a lot of the reports were pretty mundane. Like, I was driving my ATV, and this giant black cat jumped across the trail and scared the crap out of me, and I never saw it again. And so that's not someone who's looking to, gin up some kind of, whatever they're trying to do, gain attention. It's just here's this report. Well, it turns out that there have been reports of this creature for 40 years here in the gorge. And we've had senior law enforcement officials that have seen it. I've had folks, hunters who've seen it in the scope of their rifle, decided not to shoot because they thought it was an endangered species. They didn't want to get in trouble. One gentleman told me that he saw it in his driveway, and it had a cub with it. So it had a youngling. And so it seems that we've got creatures that are able to reproduce.
Yeah, I'm going to ask that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. A lot of reports at dusk and at dawn. Many people have said that they've seen it crossing a road or leaping over a road. And when its body is extended, it is the length of an entire 2 lanes of a road. So it is a big cat. Now, in full disclosure, so we probably have received about 70 reports. And of those 70 reports, about half of them say that the creature was this incredible size, this 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. Most people are reporting a cat that is closer in size to a tiger or a cougar. But there's definitely this very strong percentage. And then there's really only a handful of people who have reported that it has this ape-like face. And for me, as I've been going through this process and living through all these reports, I've been trying to make sense of what is it that's going on? And I'll get myself into the mental space of it's probably some kind of mutant cougar. And then someone else will come in with a report that it has this monkey-like face. And the one that really was impactful to me was there was a fire crew chief, a wildland firefighting team. And they're up between Mount Adams and Mount St. Helens. On the map behind me, it's sort of between those two mountains, you can see. And the whole crew had been dropped off to fight a fire. It was a 3-day mission. And they were going to get it picked up in 3 days after they completed their firework. And on the first day, the whole crew saw this cat, this black cat with an ape-like face, a monkey-like face. And that person described it and brought some clarity to me. They said that its face looked flattened. And so if you imagine the difference between a German Shepherd with a full long snout and a pug dog with a flattened face, it's still a dog, but the variation in the genetics make one have a flattened face and one have a longer snout. And as I imagine this creature, that's kind of what I'm seeing. It's this maybe some type of deformity or mutation or something of that nature. So for myself, I before we had received any reports of the Klickitat ape cat, I was in the desert area, so sort of right over my shoulder here, and there is a desert mesa called Horse Thief Butte, and from the road it just looks like a normal flat top desert mesa with straight columns coming down on the sides. But when you get up into it, it is riddled with a labyrinth of hidden passageways and amphitheaters. There are petroglyphs on the walls. You can climb up onto the top of it from inside, and you can see the whole expanse of the Columbia River from up there. And then down below it, there's a place called Horse Thief Lake. And so I was sitting up in some of the crags. It was around sunset. And I observed a large animal swimming in this lake. Now, I was, like I said, about 500 yards away. I didn't bring my binoculars with me, so I really couldn't make out what it was. But there were waterfowl on the lake, so I could get an approximation of its size. And it was clearly larger than a human, much larger than a human, but smaller than a car. It had a dark coloration, and it was sort of swimming in circles in the middle of the lake, almost patrolling it. It would submerge for up to 5 minutes and then come back to the surface. And I could not figure out what I was looking at. It was one of those kind of things where I hadn't heard any reports of this cat. And, I went down the list. It couldn't have been a bear. Bears don't submerge, and they're point-to-point swimmers. Couldn't have been an elk, again, point-to-point swimmers that don't submerge. Those are the only animals that live here that are really big enough to match the size. We do have sturgeon here that grow to be, 12 feet long and over 1,200 pounds. But those are fish that are typically in the river, and they're not surface swimmers, and they usually have lighter coloration. And so I did not know what I was looking at, but definitely, I chalked it up to an unknown creature swimming in the lake.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that right next to Horse Thief Lake is this whole series of petroglyphs. And one of them very much looks like a cat, and it has wavy lines under its head that look like water. Later, I did some research on Native American legends. Is there anything in their traditions that match this? And in the Great Lakes region, there's a very well-documented legend about a creature called Mishepashu. Now, these are supernatural panthers. They are referred to as underwater panther protectors. When Native Americans talk about creatures being from the underwater realm or from the earth realm or from the sky realm, they're talking about a being that has a foot in our physical world and also in the spirit world, however you choose to define that. But for them, there doesn't seem to be, it's not incompatible that something could have an existence in both worlds. These creatures are shapeshifters, and their primary function is that of they protect. That's what they do.
I was going to say that before. Supernatural shapeshifter. Phil, I have to ask you, what do you make out of this?
It's wild. I'm listening to it. I'm mesmerized. I think this is the first I've ever heard of this.
Yeah.
It's kind of reminds me of the Bigfoot sightings. And, the first question that a person would ask is there pictures of it? Is there video? Everybody has a GoPro pretty much on the camera, as you're driving. Mm-hmm. And then there's always the thought process of, sometimes video and pictures don't pick up these things, but we can see them somehow. That's a fact. Yep. And it's like they're interdimensional. The way he's describing it, it's like they are real. Yes. It's that fragment of time, those crossroads of time where they're appearing. Are they tangible? Mm-hmm. Can you touch it? I don't know. I don't have an answer to what I'm hearing, but I believe it because there's just so many stories out there.
Yeah.
That's
the thing that I really found remarkable. Yeah. So many credible witnesses. And so for me, those are Class A encounters where you have an eyewitness who's actually seen the creature. And just to finish the story on this Meshepeshu, these underwater panther protectors, to me, what I found fascinating was that in one of the descriptions I read, it's described as a black panther with the face of a man. And I thought, oh, wow, that could be really interesting. So the question about video, just maybe a week ago, there was a posting on one of the neighborhood pages and on the western side of the gorge. Someone took it's probably 30 seconds of a big black cat walking across their property. Now, it's one of those kind of videos, of course, and when it's put up on Facebook, the video quality gets degraded. And it's at a distance, but it's clearly a black cat walking around, and it's not a house cat. It's full-sized. And so I'm right now in the process of contacting that person and trying to get the original footage and going to be interviewing them. But I have decided that I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm getting ready to offer a $1,000 reward for authentic footage of the creature. I've had so many reports that I'm certain that it's a real thing. And the notion of giving people a reason to come forward and bring their, whatever evidence they've had. I've heard rumors that there are several people that have video of it, and it's hard to get people to bring it in. So, like I said, fortunately, the stores are successful enough that we have a little bit of bandwidth that we can offer a reward like that. Yeah. There is one video that was taken. Say again?
I'm surprised people would not want to show that evidence.
Yeah. It's, well, first of all, this is a very rural area. So the Cascade Mountains themselves are about 75,000 square miles. They start in British Columbia and extend all the way down to Northern California. So 75,000 square miles is roughly the same area as the 10 smallest states in the country combined. Now, those 10 smallest states have about 4,000 people per square mile. We have 10 people per square mile down here. There's only maybe 80,000 people that live in the entire gorge region. So getting folks, just getting the message out there is difficult. And, getting people aware of it, how hard it is to advertise. And I'm not even selling anything. I'm trying to get people to bring me stories about a strange thing that, there's reluctance to make reports a lot of times. So anyway, we were excited to see what's out there. We did get one piece of footage where an individual was working in some outbuildings. They had maybe a 20-minute encounter. They tried to take video footage of it, and they only got about 7 seconds because as soon as they started filming, the battery in their headlamp and in their cell phone died simultaneously. All you can see in this particular video is the creature's eyes, and you hear some vocalizations. Wow. And to me, it's completely inconclusive. Eyes on a dark screen, and obviously there's the eyewitness report that goes along with it. But anymore, even if you had crystal clear 4K footage of it, people can fake footage pretty easily. I mean, now with AI and, modern video editing tools. And for me, the desire to prove it conclusively like that's kind of a bottomless pit, and you could have the best evidence in the world and people wouldn't believe you.
That's true.
To me, there's just an incredible joy of the investigation. It's the searching for it. It's the, interacting with my neighbors and friends. It's my daughter. And I've got this old FJ Cruiser that we've sort of souped up into a cryptid research vehicle. And it's got cameras and drones and headlamps. My 9-year-old daughter and I will get a report and we'll head out into the mountains and see what we can find.
Wow.
But, so many people have this desire to get to the end, to prove once and for all that this thing exists. And I'm having such a wonderful time with the investigation. I kind of almost don't want it to end. Like part of the fun and part of the joy is living in a place where mysteries are still real, where we don't know everything.
Really beautiful. It really does.
And so it's just really, it's just a very joyful thing to explore and to research. And so, there's this theory that, okay, it's some kind of supernatural creature related to Native American. It's been here for a long time. And there are many, many shape-shifting, strange, gigantic creatures found in the stories of the people who are the original inhabitants of the gorge. But there's also a really interesting UFO connection. So just below Mount Adams, so on the map behind me, it's the mountain that's right above my head. That's been a UFO hotspot from the beginning. In fact, the very first UFO sighting that sort of kicked off flying saucers in the U.S. was the Kenneth Arnold sighting, 1947 June. He was flying a private plane across the Cascade Mountains. He saw 9 flying saucer craft heading from the north. They were passing Mount Rainier, and they were heading towards Mount Adams. And so he put up, it was covered by newspapers, and it's really sort of the seminal flying saucer event that got America excited about UFOs. But they were headed towards Mount Adams. There is a guy named James Gilliland who runs a place called ECETI Ranch. ECETI stands for Enlightened Contact with Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And James, for now 3 decades, has been inviting people out to his property. They come, a lot of people will camp out or bring lawn chairs. I think you might pay $50 or something like that. And you watch UFOs fly around Mount Adams all night. And people come from all over the world. People come as skeptics and they leave believers. You can go to his site, eceti.org, and you see the video footage, and there's glowing objects flying around. There's, lights that split into 4 and come back into 1. It's pretty remarkable. Wow. The connection is that they claim to be in contact with a number of extraterrestrial intelligences. And one of those races are feline humanoids that they contact regularly and, apparently are active in this region. I haven't met James myself, and so I can't speak for the veracity of any of that. But it's fascinating to me that we've got these phenomenon coexisting here in the gorge, So, there's that UFO possibility. And there's another really interesting story that it may have escaped from the Hanford nuclear site, which was one of the major components of the Manhattan Project back during World War II.
Wow. I mean, Phil, I got to ask you, if, you've seen that cat, what would you do?
I don't know. That's a good question.
What's interesting is that there have been no hostile encounters. And when you look at around the world, there are many cultures that have Black Panther myths. And whether it's Egyptians or Sumerians or South America, in every case, the Black Panther is depicted as a protector creature. Even that stupid Marvel movie, Black Panther, he's a protector. And that's a very interesting archetype. In medieval times, Christians considered the Black Panther the most supremely good of all the creatures. And there are illuminated manuscripts which depict the Black Panther was loved by all creatures except for the dragon, which as soon as it heard the Black Panther's voice would flee and go underground. Of course, the dragon representing the devil. And so in many ways, in medieval Christian mythology, the Black Panther is the Christ-like figure. And, I don't, we might just have a mutant cougar running around out here. I don't know what it is. But it's very interesting to me that, and thank heavens, that if you're going by archetypes, these creatures are not aggressive, and they're not the kind of things that are tearing people to shreds. Which is seems like pretty easily good.
It sounds like, again, like the Bigfoot stories, and there's these sightings of people and things that cannot be explained, and they're not in our time of reality. And it also goes back to one of the topics I always bring up is the Mandela effect. And it's kind of like cross dimensions, where certain people will see certain things and remember certain things, while others won't. And it's that cross dimension of time in certain hotspots around the world. Sounds like you're in one of them, where these things can appear and they can disappear. I was just recently watching something where there was a track meet and they're running, and then all of a sudden someone from another time zone is running the opposite way. And they were gone. I believe in that time travel. I believe in that somehow the parallel universes cross in certain areas where these things can appear. And all of a sudden, our video and our pictures may not pick these things up. We're not there yet. One of the biggest things about the UFOs that came forward was, how come we don't see the actual real footage and the clarity, not the blob of a metallic thing? And a physicist that came forward and says, look, we don't have the technology in some of these cases to capture that like that, what you're looking for. We're not there yet. And that kind of makes me feel like some of these stories that, you're talking about, and I've heard these other people having similar experiences where we don't have that technology to capture it the way people want. And even if you did capture it, that was AI out there. Anything can be fabricated, right? I could put a Black Panther in my house that's 50 feet tall with AI. You can't tell the difference because technology has done that. Yeah. It's good and it's bad at the same time, because for people that show proof, it's like, well, I could do that too.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword. As far advanced as you get with technology, it hurts the other way, where you don't have the believers anymore of what you actually experience it. But I do believe you, because I've heard these things, and it goes back to Native Americans too, talk about this in folklore. Especially the Indian cultures, they would worship some of these things. I believe the panther was one of them. So it's like they can appear, and then all of a sudden it's like they never did appear. But
a lot of the UFO pictures that we have from the gorge, and I've received many, oftentimes the person didn't see it, and they only recognize it in the picture after they've taken it, which I find really fascinating. Myself, I took a picture of a glowing orb right along Highway 14, and it is a really spectacular image. We consulted a team of photographic experts, and after analyzing it, we all agreed that it can't be a lens flare for numerous reasons. And again, I've worked in Photoshop. I mean, I could have faked this thing pretty easily. It wouldn't have been impossible to do that. But I know that I didn't. Like, it's my picture. And my wife and I have seen the orbs ourselves with our naked eyes. And I've got at least a dozen reports of other people who have seen glowing, floating orbs in the gorge with their naked eyes. It's fascinating to me that sometimes they're captured on film, other times they're not. Yeah. You have to discount the notion that some of them might be lens flares for sure. There's known issues with some iPhones, for instance. But an iPhone or being drunk or being high can't put something on film. And so there's definitely this strange, like you said, crossing over into our reality. And I have a theory that it may have to do with the very unique geology of the gorge is why so much paranormal activity is reported here. So about 15 million years ago, the river was flowing here already. So the Columbia River is this powerful current of energy that's been flowing for close to 20 million years, relatively in the same spot. And about 15 million years ago, this enormous fissure opened in the earth. It was 106 miles long, and huge volumes of lava started spewing out of this thing. You know, like when you see Kilauea in Hawaii, the lava that comes out of there. Well, it's that kind of lava, that thin, ropey lava, but it was 10,000 times the volume of the Kilauea eruptions. And that lava flowed literally 300 miles through the ancient Columbia River Valley and all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So you have such an enormous quantity of lava that it's built, these cliff walls that are hundreds and hundreds of feet tall. And so these eruptive events, they estimate there's over 300 of them. If you took all of the lava that erupted and spread it out evenly over the United States, it would cover the lower 48 states in 60 feet deep of lava. Like, that is how much we're talking about. Well, they erupted at different periods of time. And so there's basically a layer cake, so like the lava would flow 10,000, 100,000 years would go by, soil would land on it and trees would grow and things would live, and then another wave of lava would come across. And so it built this layer cake. Each time that lava cooled, the magnetic material in that rock would orient itself towards the Earth's magnetic north, right? And so it's called paleomagnetism. It's a whole study that they have in geology about the magnetic orientation of rocks. Well, by the time the second flow came, and the third and the fourth and the 100th and 200th flow, the Earth's magnetic north had shifted. In the last 100 years, our magnetic north pole has shifted 700 miles. And since the 1970s, it's been moving 30 miles a year, so accelerating at its pace. But each of these layers has a different magnetic orientation. So the gorge has got this incredibly complex electromagnetic environment. You add on to that there are 14 dams on the Columbia River, and they generate 44% of all the hydroelectric power in the United States. It's enough energy to power a city the size of Seattle multiplied times 7. And so you've got this capture of energy and then transmission through high power lines. And many of the reports that we received are actually along high power lines emanating from the dams. So you take that incredible, these strange magnetic layer cake that we've got going on, and all this electromagnetic activity from the power. You also have these mountains. They arose between 2 million and 50,000 years ago. So the Mount Hood, Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens, those are relatively recent geological events. And they're this strong vertical energy that is, sort of running perpendicular to the flow of the energy of the river. Take all that together, and you've got this really unique environment. Now, there was a guy in the 90s, Dr. Michael Persinger. He was up in Ontario. He's an accredited professor. He created a thing called the God Helmet. And what they did was they took very small amount of complex magnetic field signals. They attached it to a helmet you'd wear on your head. And they could induce a number of unique perceptions. People would have the perception, they could basically turn the signal to a particular setting. People would have the sensation that there was a sensed presence near them. People could, another setting would make people feel great fear or feel joy. Some people claim to have even seen God. Mm-hmm. And what I believe was happening there, you could say, oh, they're just having hallucinations. I don't think that that's what's happening. I think what's happening is we normally have our senses calibrated to a certain range of perception. Like, we can see visible light, but we can't see infrared. We can't see ultraviolet. There are sounds that we can't hear. So, our dogs can hear things that we can't hear. And so we are sort of calibrated to a certain frequency of perceptions. And when you're getting influenced by magnetic fields, I think what's happening is your perception is shifting and you're able to perceive things you don't normally perceive. And I think the complicated, very unique, very specialized electromagnetic environment of the gorge is shifting people's perceptual capabilities so that they can see things that are always present, but are not within our standard perceptual range. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. I've heard of the God Helmet. I've heard of that.
Yeah. And so again, I'm not a scientist, and I'm, these mysteries come through our door, and I try to make sense of, why is this happening? Why here? Why so much here? Why this broad array of phenomena that all seem to be things that sit outside our current understanding of the natural laws? Like, there shouldn't be, 5-foot tall, monkey-faced black cats roaming around in Washington State. There shouldn't be giant bipedal humanoids, hairy. There shouldn't be UFOs that seem to defy the laws of physics. Yet people are experiencing them. And when you look at the earliest records of human thought, so these are cave paintings in Europe, 40,000 years old, they're all depicting impossible creatures, human-animal hybrids, things that shouldn't really exist.
The black-eyed children, right? That too.
Yeah. And so this is as long as we have been humans recording our thoughts, we have been talking about phenomena like this. It's not something you can just dismiss by a wave of the hand and say, oh, people are hallucinating, or they're high, or they're stupid, or they're ignorant primitives, and they're, inventing stories about the world that aren't true. No, every culture on every continent where people lived in every era of time has depicted in their art and talked about things that seem impossible as we currently understand them. Earlier you're talking about science, not recognizing some of these things. And it's a kind of, to me, almost an arrogance. It's like a teenager who knows everything and saying, because it doesn't fit my theory of how the world works, it can't be real. And it's almost like saying, well, you're trying to tell me that the color orange is here, and I've brought the world's best microphone, and my microphone isn't detecting any orange, so clearly orange doesn't exist. And it's the notion that they haven't invented the equipment to measure this phenomenon, so they just dismiss it as not real.
True.
If you were running around in 1750, you would think Benjamin Franklin was a total nut job. He's out in lightning storms flying kites with keys attached to metal strings. And he's, at that point, electricity was an exotic sorcery, but he's out there, arguably one of the brightest minds of the time. And he's exploring these things, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. To his neighbors, he looked like a nut job. And, when you go back in history, it's the best and the brightest that are intensely interested in this. It's the shaman, it's the pharaohs, it's the Ben Franklins, it's Leonardo da Vinci's. These are the guys that are looking into the stuff and taking it seriously. And then there's the broad masses, like people like me who, don't have any real formal scientific training, who have a sense that there's something out there that goes beyond the material world. And then there's really this sort of very thin band of people with their arms folded saying, you all are idiots, and I'm the only one who really knows what's going on in the world. That to me seems arrogant. And I think, the notion that we haven't figured everything out yet seems a little more mature and a little more wise.
I definitely believe that people are really starting to open up a little bit more to this, to everything that we're talking about tonight. It's slowly getting there. I mean, it's just too much evidence to ignore, I feel.
Yeah. Look at Skinwalker Ranch. Look at that. Look at all the activity there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
It's remarkable. And I think that may be another one of those places where the geology and the geography are conspiring to impact our internal electromagnetic environment. In the hippocampus, which is, one of the brain centers that is associated with this phenomenon, each gram has up to 5 million magnetite crystals in it. And they're in a form that is not occurring in nature, that the brain is manufacturing them. And what Persinger believed was that these magnetite crystals in our brain are actually sensory organs, and they are part of how humans encounter the world. And so when you get to certain locations on the Earth where the electromagnetic environment is unusual, it activates perceptual abilities that aren't normally present.
Yeah.
True.
Absolutely.
I like that. That actually makes sense to me.
Have you had any paranormal teams investigate your area?
Well, part of the reason why I do interviews is because I can't investigate 220 reports myself. Like that's kind of it's just more than one guy could handle. And I'm really inviting folks who have more time in the saddle investigating paranormal phenomena come out. We've had a couple of teams come out and look at a few things. I'm happy to, if people want to contact me, you can, the best email address would be staff@margiesoutdoorstore.com. But I want people to come out here. I want other investigators to check it out. There have been reports of stuff by St. Helens and by Mount Adams and by Mount Hood and all throughout the gorge. And no one has ever really looked at it in a global fashion and said, this whole region, it's basically 2,000 square miles, has got this really intense hotspot. What's going on here? And, it's sort of a one-stop shop for UFOs and ghosts and cryptids and orbs and, you name it. I mean, we've even had significant cattle mutilations in the area as recently as a year and a half ago. Wow. And so, there's just this really broad range of phenomenon going on here. And, when you're in the gorge, first of all, it's a stunningly beautiful place. Like you come here and your eyeballs fall out of your head. But if you are able, even if you're not a spiritually sensitive person, and you just calm your mind, you can literally feel the energy flowing through this area. Like it is palpable here. And, I am inviting more folks to come out here and check it out. I think that there are a lot of clues that can help us gain understanding about some of these phenomenon. And this is a place where it's basically a Disneyland of it.
Well, I have Sherry Emily Avery in chat. True Ghost Stories. Reach out to them. Okay. Reach out. True Ghost Stories. Yeah. They were actually at our house. Really great team.
Well, so right over here over this shoulder is a town called the Dalles. It was the final stop on the Oregon Trail. After here, you had to basically get on the river and head into the Portland area. And recently, I began to, query that the folks that live there. There's probably maybe 17,000 people that live in the Dalles. That place, the number of ghost stories that are going on there is off the charts. Like it is significant. There's a place that used to be a tuberculosis hospital. It was then converted into an asylum for the non-criminally insane, basically from the 1950s to the 1980s. And then in the 1980s, it was converted into a community college. But that community college is the most haunted place in the gorge, without a doubt. The bookstore, people are constantly hearing noises. Books are being dropped off of shelves. There's an elevator there. So in the basement of the tuberculosis ward, there was a refrigerated morgue because so many people died. And then later, when it was a sanatorium, like that's where they're doing electroconvulsive therapy and drug therapy, like with LSD and mescaline, because back during the 60s, that was legally prescribed mode of treatment. And so students will get into this elevator and they'll press the third floor and it will take them to the basement. And many, many people have reports of getting in that elevator and it taking them down. Numerous footsteps. People hear phantom coughing in the building all the time. And the janitor said that he was taken to the bottom floor when he tried to get to the third floor, and he saw an apparition down there of a man basically walking and jingling some keys. So, that's just a brief summary, but right next to that community college is the old Pioneer Cemetery, and people have reported hearing phantom horse-drawn carriages. There's numerous reports of vanishing people in the city of the Dalles. In that cemetery, many people have seen a young girl with crutches who seems to vanish. She looks like a regular person, and then she's gone. And multiple people have reported that. And so the whole area, like I said, whether you're looking at the ghost phenomenon or you're looking at the cryptids, the UFOs, it's all seems to be concentrated here.
Wow. I mean, this show has gone by so fast. It always does. It has been a lot. I think we've learned a lot from the show. I think every question that I had, you pretty much answered for me, and so thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd like to see where this goes as research and development goes on and more teams go out there. I'm interested to see how far the technology that we have is able to capture some of the manifestation that is occurring. And, I think that we're on the edge and the cusp of time where people and the awareness and like the third eye is awakened, where the veil is thin and people's perception of the other side is becoming more observant to things that are not within our reality. And you have something great there that you're talking about, and I, for one, believe you. And I encourage you, like you're doing tonight on this show, to have teams go there, because with evidence comes truth, and with truth comes discovery, and with discovery comes the next step towards mankind, and things that we didn't believe to perceive are actually true within the realms of multiple realities. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And where can people find you really fast?
So the best place is margiesoutdoorstore.com. And we are on Instagram under Margie's Outdoor Store and on Facebook. And we've got a couple of videos on YouTube. We're trying to build that library a little bit more and help people see what's going on. On our website, we've got some images of some of the stuff, and honestly, we barely scratched the surface of the reports. There's so much interesting and fascinating things going on out here. So we've got that. I've produced this map behind me. I drew myself, and we sell this in our store. It's got the locations of many of the reports that we've seen, that we've heard in the gorge. And I'm just now working with a business that runs shuttle buses, and we are putting on a paranormal tour of the gorge. And so it's like 130 miles, and you spend half a day, 4.5 hours. You start in the rainforest, you go all the way up to the desert where some of those sightings were.
Really cool. All right, well,
you get to
before we get thrown off, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Thank you for your services as well. Thank you to Carnation for fully sponsoring the show tonight. We love them. And join us next week on 107.7 FM and 105.3 FM from New Orleans. And we are live on Roku right now. Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you.
You bet.
Have a great night. Thank you.
You too.